So, Dr. Amen, my name is Rob. I'm helping just to moderate our session here. So, for everyone, we're doing a question and answer with Dr. Amen. I don't know if it's going to work best. I can leave the microphone up here. I can try to make it around the room if that works for everybody. So, as you have questions, so Dr. Amen, I'll start with one, just an easy, just get us started. And my hope is that we've got some questions here in the group, and I'll just help to bring that around and moderate from there. So, based on what you've told us today, the number of SPECT scans that you've done, what would you say are some of the major diagnostic findings through kind of a summary of all your work?
That our diagnostic categories fail us in many ways. Depression is not one thing, autism's not one thing. They all have subtypes that clinical people are not aware of. So I think that's one big thing. I've written whole books about addiction. It's not one thing, it's six different things. ADHD, seven different things. The second thing is that mild traumatic brain injury is a major cause of psychiatric problems. And nobody knows it because the people they end up seeing, psychiatrists, psychologists, don't ever look at the brain. And so they don't realize that concussion playing soccer damaged the brain and then put them at greater risk for ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression. Another thing that the scans taught us is they can be better. I mean, I think that's the most exciting message is if you do the right thing, your brain can be better, and it can be better quickly. It doesn't have to take a long time.
Great, thank you. As we open it up, I can ask some more questions, but I'll bring there you go.
Dr. Amen, I'm wondering, with the legalization of marijuana, have you seen an increase with decreased brain health?
Yes. So I'm not a fan of putting people who use marijuana in jail. I think that's a very bad use of resources. But I'm also not a fan of marijuana. And as it has been legalized, the perception that it's dangerous goes down, and so its use goes up. And I think the answer is we need to teach kids to love and care for their brain, and then we need to show them scans of people who use marijuana. I published a study on 1,000 marijuana users. Every area of their brain is lower in blood flow. And then I published what I think is the world's largest imaging study on 62,454 scans on how the brain ages. So little kids have busy brains, old people have sleepy brains, and we sort of did these aging maps on this massive group of people. And then we went, so what accelerates aging? And schizophrenia is the worst. If you have schizophrenia, your brain looks 10 years older than you are. But the next worst was marijuana. And that was actually a surprise for us. It was worse than alcohol. It was worse than smoking. Alcohol and smoking are not good for you. But kids just don't get that if they use marijuana, they are changing their brain and increasing anxiety, depression, suicide, and psychosis. So my nieces, who I talked about, I taught them a new word recently. It's called scromiting. And they're like, what's scromiting? It's screaming and vomiting at the same time. And emergency rooms are filled with scrometers. And yeah. And then, it's like, I have a 20-year-old. I have 6 kids, 47 to 14. And my 20-year-old says, you know, Dad, it's not alcohol anymore, it's mushrooms. That kids are having mushroom parties and they're microdosing on a regular basis. And it's the most common question I get at conferences is, what about psilocybin? And I'm like, it's going to go the way of benzos. And it's going to go the way of alcohol, and the way of marijuana, and the way of opiates. Everybody's excited. Everybody's like, I want research dollars for this. And I'm very worried about it. The big innovations in psychiatry are not imaging and natural ways to heal the brain. The big innovations in psychiatry are marijuana, ketamine, and magic mushrooms. So the street drugs of the 60s are making a comeback.
Dr. Amen, all of your Bright Minds tips are important and kind of the range there. If someone was going to start in on there, what's the best place for people to start for their brain health?
Well, I worked with BJ Fogg at Stanford. He's in charge of their persuasive tech lab on how people change. And he basically says, you got to have them do the smallest thing that will make the biggest impact. And we came up with a whole bunch of tiny habits. The mother tiny habit, the big one, is whenever you go to do something, just ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with information and love of yourself, love of the reason God put you on earth, love of your family, you just start making the right decisions. And is this good for my brain or bad for it? And make a game with it with your children. When my 20-year-old Chloe was 2, I used to go, hey, let's play Chloe's game. Is this good for your brain or bad for it? If I said avocado, she'd go 2 thumbs up, God's butter. If I said blueberry, she'd put her little hands on her hips and go, are they organic? Because non-organic berries hold more pesticides than almost any other fruit. And I'm like, no, they're organic. And she goes, oh, 2 thumbs up, God's candy. So play the game. And shouldn't we teach brain health in school? It's as important as English. And I think they should get it over and over and over again, because that's how we're going to address this mental mess that we're in with children.
Thank you.
How about exercise, both mental and physical?
So it's critical. If you want to keep your brain cells. So there's actually research that suggests neurons, brain cells, don't die. It's blood vessels that die. And if you want to keep your brain healthy, it's absolutely essential you do physical exercise, because when you exercise, that helps your heart, it helps your blood vessels be more flexible. And in Bright Minds, the B in Bright Minds is blood flow. The number one brain imaging predictor of Alzheimer's disease is low blood flow. And so exercise is critical. The study comparing exercise to Zoloft, one of the good antidepressants. At the end of 12 weeks, they're equally effective. And at the end of 10 months, exercise is more effective for depression than Zoloft. And so walk like you're late, 45 minutes, 4 times a week, and park far away, right? Don't try to be that person that gets the parking lot right next to the grocery store. Park on the other side of the parking lot so you get steps and you walk. When it comes to mental exercise, it's really a use it or lose it phenomenon, that new learning is really important. And it has to be new for you. Like reading brain scans is pretty technical and can be a bit complicated, but I've done so much of it that for me, it's pattern recognition, and I know almost immediately healthy or not, overactive or not, and what's the pattern. So for me, it's not reading more brain scans to keep my brain young. It's learning a language, it's traveling, it's playing a new sport, even if I'm not good at it. And when it comes to physical exercise, racket sports win. A couple of studies, big studies, like 90,000 people studies, show that people who play racket sports live longer than everybody else. People who play football live the least long.
Hi, I have the friend text this to me. Is after you're going from an unhealthy brain to a healthy brain, is therapy still needed in trauma-induced cases?
Therapy is likely to be more effective. So, I always think of people in four big circles, right? What's the biology? What's the psychology? What's the social circle and the spiritual circle? You get your brain healthy. Well, if you have a lot of bad programming, you grew up with negative parents, or you grew up with addicted parents, or you grew up being bullied or having trauma, you still need therapy. But it's much more likely to go faster when your brain is healthy. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mike Rickenbaugh here, the state senator for Florence County. Obviously, there's always a draw for resources and for dollars for a lot of agencies in the state. Is there anything with your research that you would say you'd ask the legislatures to do that is not simply writing checks and throwing money at it? What else can we do to affect behavioral health for a better?
Well, I think we can begin to discuss a new paradigm, and you could legislate brain health education. It's, given that the brain controls everything you do and everything you are, we should be teaching kindergartners, fourth graders, middle schoolers, high schoolers about brain health. And we have a program called Brain Thrive by 5 for little ones and by 25 for middle school and teenagers. Independent research showed it decreased drug, alcohol, and tobacco use, decreased depression, and improved self-esteem. So I think legislating, kids need to know this, and you'll get so much backlash, and ultimately it'll be funded by the pharmaceutical industry and by big food. So I would just predict that, because who would argue with brain health? And then I would spend money if I was the legislature and do a demonstration project. It's, we're going to take 1,000 kids and we're going to image them as they start treatment. And then we're going to compare them to a randomized group of 1,000 kids nobody ever scanned. And keep everything the same. And let's start creating a brain health specialty rather than the nonsense that's going on now, where millions of people in North Carolina and South Carolina are being put on medication and nobody has a clue what's going on in their brain. I'm so grateful you all invited me. Not all of you invited me, but the people invited me so I could talk to all of you. It's
Good
such a
evening,
great
Doctor.
opportunity you have.
Good evening. It's an honor to be speaking with you today. I'm Teresa Myers-Irving. I'm the mayor here in Florence, but I'm also a nurse. So my question, I've heard about physical and mental health activities, but what I would like to know when it comes to sleep, does the quality of sleep affect the brain health, especially when it comes to REM or RAM sleep? And is there a best time of night to be sure that we're focused upon getting sleep for the health of the brain?
So, yeah, I wish I would have talked about all of the Bright Minds risk factors. Like B is for blood flow, R is retirement and aging, I is inflammation. The S is sleep. Why? Because if you're not sleeping, your brain starts to really struggle. And here in California, actually, the legislature made a rule they can't start school before 8:30 in the morning. That way, honoring the new research that children who get just an hour less sleep than their peers have a higher incidence of depression and suicide. And so when you sleep, it's like, why do you sleep? Because the brain cleans and washes itself, and it integrates what you experienced the day before into your long-term memory. And so if you're not sleeping, learning is a problem. Trash builds up, so focus will be a problem. And one of the huge issues I see clinically is kids are taking their gadgets to bed with them. Parents need to take their gadgets, their devices, and put them in another room until kids are like 16, 17. And I know some of you are like, oh, whoa, that's so rigid. It's like, whoa, this generation's in big trouble. Why? Because they have immediate access to these devices that are damaging their brains. And so sleep is a priority. You should target as an adult 7.5 hours. Below that seems to be trouble. If you don't get 6 hours of sleep at night, it actually turns off 700 health promoting genes. And those of you that snore at night, that stop breathing at night, that your spouse is like, you have sleep apnea and you're refusing to believe it, you want to believe it, because untreated sleep apnea triples the risk for Alzheimer's disease.
Doctor, you said if we ran an experiment, getting 1,000 kids or 100 kids brain scan, where would we go in South Carolina to get that done? And who would read it and be able to interpret what the results showed?
So we're actually chatting with people at the Medical University of South Carolina to do it. We can figure out where to get it done. There are SPECT cameras in virtually every big hospital in the world because it's common that they do SPECT heart studies, SPECT bone studies, SPECT thyroid studies. And the medicine is widely available. We actually, my research director has a PhD in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We can actually read those scans with computers as if my eyes read them. So it's a very exciting time. And then, you know, ultimately it's not hard. I really work really hard to make complex things as simple as can be. And we can teach our algorithm to whoever professionals would be involved in that demonstration project. And all of you should think about getting your own brain scanned. Why? Because you'll love your brain. When I first started doing it in 1991, I was so excited. I was just like a little kid. And I scanned my mom, and she had a stunningly beautiful brain. And it reflected her life. 7 children, 54 grandchildren, great-grandchildren. She knows everybody's birthday. She was the Newport Beach Club champion for golf in 1978. I mean, she's just really an awesome human. And then I scanned myself, and it wasn't nearly as healthy as hers. And I was horrified. But I had meningitis when I was a young soldier. I had bad habits. I was overweight. And I developed this concept called brain envy. I wanted her brain, or at least a healthy brain like hers. And I often say Freud was wrong. Penis envy is not the cause of anybody's problem. It's you don't have enough brain envy, because the brain is the only organ size matters. Anyways, it's teaching. If you get your brain scan, you start to love it. You start to take care of it. And if it's not good, you rehabilitate it. And if it's awesome, you celebrate it. But as soon as you look, you develop an attachment to it. And it's just harder to get drunk. It's just harder to stay up late playing words with friends. It's like, put that away and go to bed. And that's what I'm trying to do with my public television specials and my social media and Amen clinics. We're trying to create this revolution where we stop talking about mental illnesses and start talking about brain health. Love your brain.
Hi, doctor.
Hi,
I
doc-
just had a quick question for you. It's regarding epilepsy, but also the ADHD or inattentive ADHD that usually comes along with some of those diagnoses. So I'm in a group with a couple of other parents that have these same types of situations where we know sleep deprivation, according, as the mayor said, can be a trigger, but also the mental incapacities that happen as a result of the epilepsy. Can you kind of talk through what some of your findings have been around children with epilepsy? Did they have an unhealthy brain to begin with, or is the epilepsy causing an unhealthy brain, or both?
So SPACT was actually originally developed for seizures and strokes, and then expanded to dementia and head trauma in the 1980s. And so we've done a lot of work around seizures and actually think of many psychiatric disorders sort of like behavioral epilepsy. Like, for example, why do anti-seizure medicines work for anxiety? Why do they work for bipolar disorder? Why do they work for intermittent explosive disorder? If I had a child with epilepsy, I would try them on a ketogenic diet. I think our standard American diet is contributing to an increased incidence of seizures because carbohydrates. So when a child has a breakthrough seizure, it could be they got a bunch of sugar that day. And I have a granddaughter who has epilepsy. And when she was 5 months old, she had 160 seizures. It was just an awful day. And on a ketogenic diet, it really helps stabilize her. So I think, you know, maybe a modified Atkins, that's probably easier. But if I had a child with epilepsy, I would keep a journal on whenever they had a seizure or breakthrough seizure and what they had to eat that day. I'm a huge fan of let's eat for the brain rather than eat because McDonald's has a new meal and a new commercial. Let's be really thoughtful. And one of the tiny habits, we talked about tiny habits, when it comes to what you put in your mouth, I love food. So do I love what I'm eating? And does it love me back? Like, I don't know if some of you have been in bad relationships in the past. I know I have. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm married to my best friend. And I'm for certain not doing it with food. I am only loving things that love me back. And so, you know, I could love donuts, but they hate me. So I had to break up with donuts.
Hi, Dr.
Um,
Amon.
Let me just finish that thought. Inattentive ADD, they do go with seizures, but I see them as very separate disorders. An unhealthy brain, a traumatized brain, is more prone to seizures. The healthier it gets, the less likely it would be having seizures that are not properly treated can damage the brain. And in my book, Healing ADD, I talk about 7 types of ADD. There's one type called temporal lobe ADD, which often goes with these behavioral seizures that I mentioned. So that specific type would overlap with epilepsy. It just reminds me of this case of Alex. I'm at a party for the Samuele Foundation, and this couple came up to me and they started talking to me about their son, and he's got wicked epilepsy, but he's got other things too. If he doesn't get his way, he gets really upset. And he didn't get pancakes that morning and ended up chasing his mother around the house with a butcher knife. And I'm listening to this at the party. And then, of course, I'm like, well, has anybody looked at his brain? And they'd done an MRI, but they'd never done a functional study. So just so people know, MRIs and CT scans, for the most part, look at structure. SPECT looks at function, looks at how the brain works. And structural scans, not that helpful when it comes to mental health issues. SPECT, very helpful. And so I'm like, has anybody looked at the function of his brain? And they said, no. I said, well, you might want to bring him to the clinic. And it turned out he had a cerebellar tumor when he was young, and they took it out, but they didn't get all of it, so they had to go back. And when they went back, he got meningitis from the surgery that damaged his temporal lobe. You could clearly see it on the scan. He has temporal lobe epilepsy. But his cingulate gyrus in the front middle part of his brain was seizing as well, was so overactive. And it was causing the cognitive rigidity. So if things didn't go his way, he got upset. And just adjusting his medication, he did great. Now he's like graduated from college. And yeah, that was a great case. All right, next question. Sorry.
Hi, Dr. Ayman. My question is, what are the leading causes of the inflammation in the brain? And the second part is, would insurance cover the brain scans?
So insurance generally doesn't cover it because they say it's experimental and it's behavioral. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the brain. So it's why I don't take insurance in our clinic, because I'm just over fighting with people. We're not aligned, right? The insurance company's main goal is to make money, and my main goal is to get people well. So from a legislation standpoint, since you asked, that would be a great thing to compel insurance companies to pay for brain imaging. Leading causes of inflammation, gum disease. It's like you want to love your dentist and you want to go on a regular basis, get your teeth cleaned, take care of your gums, floss every night. Is really important. Gum disease is a major cause of inflammation. Gut disease or leaky gut is a major cause of inflammation. Low omega-3 fatty acids, a major cause of inflammation. It's estimated 98% of the population has low levels of omega-3 fatty acids. I think all of you should be taking an omega-3 supplement. And then, of course, the big one is the standard American diet. The real weapons of mass destruction or highly processed, pesticide sprayed, high glycemic, low fiber food-like substances stored in plastic containers. That's sort of a mouthful, but it's sugar and food that turns to sugar. There was a study from the Mayo Clinic where they looked at 3 different diets. So they looked at people who had primarily a fat-based diet. So think avocados, nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables, fish, healthy oils, 42% less risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. And then they looked at people who sort of had a carnivore diet, a protein-based diet, and then 21% less risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. And then they looked at people who had the standard American diet, bread, pasta, potatoes, rice, fruit juice, sugar, 400% increased risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. Think about it. It's the food. We are never going to find that one drug that will prevent Alzheimer's disease. It's going to be food and exercise and going after all of the Bright Minds risk factors. That was sort of a cool answer, wasn't it?
Hey, doctor. I find it no coincidence that May is not only Mental Health Awareness Month, but also Brain Tumor Awareness Month. In 2020,
Say that again.
May is not only Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's also Brain Tumor Awareness Month. In 2020, I was diagnosed with a tectile plate glioma that is inoperable. Do you have any advice on, other than lifestyle changes and following what my doctors have told me, what I can do to improve my brain health?
Well, I'd for sure do the lifestyle things. What treatments have you done so far?
There have been no treatments. I take a anticonvulsant for seizures. That's it. And I did have brain surgery for hydrocephalus because of where the brain tumor's at.
So they put a shunt in?
Yes, I have a VP shunt.
Yeah, my nephew has one. He had an arachnoid cyst that was putting incredible pressure on his brain. You know, I would think about a ketogenic diet because you just don't want to, sugar feeds cancer cells. And, you know, I would just be discouraging those cancer cells for sure.
Thank you.
Two questions, Doctor. One, you said in terms of legislation with insurance, are there any current bills in Congress or on the federal level that you would support or endorse, or any activity on the federal level?
Not currently that I'm aware of.
Okay. Other question is, and as you talk, I can see the link. I've heard that Mounjaro, that Eli Lilly is seeing some drug potential with Alzheimer's. And so it seems that if they've identified some things with weight loss, that maybe there might be, you know, that might be the bridge that they're getting there. Have you heard of anything that Eli Lilly is doing? And what do you think about drugs like Ozempic, Mounjaro for weight loss, and then again with the Mounjaro or Eli Lilly with drugs for Alzheimer's?
So clearly diabetes and obesity are risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So again, going back to Bright Minds, the D is diabetes. I published 3 studies on 33,000 scans that show as your weight goes up, the size and function of the brain goes down. That should scare the fat off anyone. And so I'm not a huge fan of these medications unless you've tried everything else. Now, I'm not a big fan of gastric stapling, but if you've tried everything else, then staple your stomach, right? Neither of them are in the top 5, but they may be in the top 10. With these medications are actually finding some use with addiction because they tend to affect the craving centers in the brain. And so I think over the next year or two, we'll begin to see research coming out showing it helps with addiction. And clearly, if you are overweight, of the 11 major risk factors that steal your mind, just being overweight means you now have 7 of them. Because being overweight, I published the study, decreased blood flow to the brain, makes your brain look older than you are. Fat cells, they're called adipocytes, increase inflammation throughout the whole body. So you have low blood flow, brain looks older, inflammation, fat stores toxins. Fat also takes healthy testosterone levels and flips it into unhealthy cancer-promoting forms of estrogen. And so, given that 72% of America is overweight, it's like, this is a huge, no pun intended, public health problem. And go into the drugs. And I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings, and I don't mean to right now. But going to the drugs is like trying to solve the pandemic with the vaccine. And I got the vaccine. But you didn't hear one other thing coming out of Washington about go outside and get sunshine. And we have 4% of the world's population and 16% of the world's COVID deaths. It is just insane how we reacted to this pandemic. And I think in part, that's responsible for the mental health crisis we have now. The fear without our public officials, our public health officials, you never heard them talk about, we have to get healthy. You have to know your vitamin D level. And yes, I'm still traumatized by how we reacted, but trying to solve the obesity epidemic with these drugs is sort of like trying to solve the pandemic with the vaccine. It doesn't mean you don't do it or use it, but it's like, let's get really smart and make sure we teach people how to get physically healthy and brain healthy. So I apologize if I upset anybody, but I'm still traumatized by how we acted. And I'm worried we're going to do it again. I hope not.
Thank you, Dr. Ammon. My name is Casey Edmonds. I'm with Clubhouse International, the only global mental health nonprofit dedicated to ending social and economic isolation to individuals with SMI. I really appreciate your holistic approach in the conversations on exercise and sleep and nutrition and the role of drugs. But I am curious, what is your purview on the role of effective person-centered psychosocial rehabilitation as part of a proactive system strategy to community-wide mental health, or in your case, brain health?
So give me some examples so I have a better idea and grasp of it.
Yeah, as we were looking at healing the individual at the human level, right? How can we meet them in the spiritual sense, in the social sense? What other things should we be considering as a community to be thinking about areas of expansion and consideration to help others in the community that are struggling or experiencing serious mental illness?
So if we go back to the 4 circles, is we've been focusing a lot on the brain circle and what are the things you can do physically to have a healthier brain. Well, we have to talk about the other circles, right? So get the hardware of your soul right. We've got to talk about the software. We need programs to teach kids how to think, right? We live in a society of undisciplined thinkers. And so I call them ants, automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that just come into your mind automatically and mess you up. I was 28 years old in my psychiatric residency at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center when I had a professor say, you have to teach your patients not to believe every stupid thing they think. And I'm like, but I believe every stupid thing I think. And so I think cognitive behavior therapy training should be embedded in school systems, just like brain health is embedded in school systems. And then there's a whole science of connection. And I think helping people be connected is critical. We have this epidemic of isolation and loneliness, in large part driven by social media. And, you know, we're more connected than ever before, and we're more disconnected or lonely than ever before. And so supporting groups, schools, churches, other organizations where people actually get together, I think that's critical. And spiritually, I think as attendance at church goes down, we're also seeing a rise in mental health stuff. Do you guys want to see? Can I show you what I think is the causes of sort of the mental mess we're in? Would that be an okay thing to do?
I'm hearing a lot of yeses if you can't hear from there.
Let me see if I can find it quickly. And I think it'll go to answer this specific question. Because, you know, with it is also the way out. So it's sort of the way in to this mental mess and what I see as the way out. Okay, explaining Gen Z. So Dr. Phil and I just did this on his network this week. Okay, so we've talked about how horrible these numbers are. And when you look at 57% of teenage girls report being persistently sad, 13% have tried to kill themselves. It is horrifying. And so let's explain this in the 4 circles. So biological, we have this social media tech addiction that depletes dopamine and wears out their pleasure centers. We have the inflammation from the virus itself. So I don't want anybody to hear that I didn't think the pandemic was real, killed my father. So I just think our response to it gets an F. Low quality food, we talked about the standard American diet, the increased incidence of obesity in children, the increased use and distorted perceptions of alcohol and drugs. Alcohol is not a health food. Vaping is not a healthy form of smoking. Marijuana is not innocuous, and microdosing is not the road to happiness and emotional freedom. And then we haven't yet talked about the toxic products that we're putting on children's bodies. So from a biological standpoint, some of the things contributing. From a psychological standpoint, this generation is living with COVID trauma. The worldwide fear, the death tolls, the lockdown, societal unrest, the distrust of the government after the pandemic. And some universities are still requiring people to get the vaccine, even though we know it doesn't protect you from getting it or spreading it. The automatic negative thoughts. We live in a society of undisciplined thinkers who watch CNN or Fox, everything is breaking, gloom and doom all day long. The negative news, the adverse childhood experiences, social media comparisons leading to body image issues, the instant gratification. Now it's going to get worse with AI. And then the social causes. So just what you were mentioning, loneliness, isolation. 73% of Gen Zers report feeling lonely. The social media bullying, dating apps, which if you don't limit that, they're going to make you feel very unhappy. The political divide, unlike anything I've seen in my 70 years on the planet. Less time with parents because people are running, families are just running so hard. And then parents not doing a good job of modeling how to deal with their own anxiety. And then spiritually, lack of belief or connection to a higher power. This generation is less religious, lower belief in God, higher atheism and being agnostic. And 50% of young people feel like their life has no meaning. So what's the way out? It's love your brain. I should have put down, love your brain. Limit social media, high quality food, healthy weight, education on drugs and alcohol, limit toxins. Think Dirty and EWG are apps you can download and scan your personal products and tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 how quickly they're killing you. Psychological, I'm a huge fan of therapy if your brain is working right, because it just works better. We teach people to kill the ants, turn off the news, because I think most people know the news is actually no longer the news. Get help if you have adverse childhood experiences greater than 2 or 3. Limit social media. So notice social media limiting is in all the circles. In-person connection, which sounds like maybe what your group is doing. Limit social media. Limit time on dating apps, and practice tolerance of the political divide. And then purpose. I mean, really helping people get in touch with their purpose. So just some thoughts.
Dr. Amen, I believe we have come to the end of our time. Can you hear me?
You guys are in the dark.
I wish that we could see you. I believe we have come to the end of our time.
Okay.
We want to thank you so very much. You have been so generous with your time and your wonderful knowledge. You have over-delivered on our ask for you to speak vision into the Florence community. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I send you a big hug, air hug to California.
Thank
We
you
will
so much.
definitely spend time looking at how we're going to apply this new knowledge and information. And we look forward to all the good things that are going to develop out of the presentations today.
Great. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
sir.
everybody. I'm deeply honored.
So I just want to thank you all for coming. Our conference theme was to connect, collaborate, and transform. It is our hope that you all have a better notion now of the hard work we need to do as a part of transformation, and that you also see that, yes, we've got wonderful health systems doing major, great things and on such a right path. But we all have to do our part. It takes a community effort. And thank you for so many that signed up to be a part of some of those community efforts at the Jonathan Foundation table. We really appreciate each and every one of you coming and taking part. Thank you. Have a safe trip home.